Hello everyone, Riff Raff Hornhelm, back yet again with another presentation from the Dwarven Vault, and today we will have another monster review. Once again, continuing the theme of entry-level, primarily subterranean monsters, as were first introduced in the Monster Manual in, well, there's some argument about this part of it. I technically got mine at the very end of 1977, but most of the country, most of the world, didn't see them until early 1978. Doesn't really matter. Let's move on. So the Monster Manual for the original AD&D once again has established the general monsters that are used in Dungeons and Dragons, which have morphed in almost every case, sometimes very considerably, from this, the original Monster Manual, to where you're at today with 5e. This, once again, going back to roots, since this is the 50th year since Dungeons & Dragons was introduced to the general marketplace, we're sticking with the early stuff. So this is the Monster Manual. Today we're going to talk about another one of the iconic monsters that has also morphed a hell of a lot since the earliest days of D&D, and that would be the Kobold. Now, like I said, we're talking entry-level monsters. These are very entry-level, one-hit die. Generally a little bit weaker than an orc. Now their looks, okay, the earliest versions of these, they're only about 2-3 feet tall, and they are semi-lizard-like creatures. Definitely human-type creatures, not the smartest things in the world out there. They have intelligence, but they're lower than average. They mingle well in terms of intelligence levels with like the orcs. And much like the orcs, they also hate most living things, not necessarily all living things, like the orcs do. The kobolds have changed quite a bit over the years. Now, in the earliest days of Dungeons & Dragons, they were probably, really hard to say, the most disposable of monsters. They tend to attack in packs, usually, anywhere from, I think it's 4 to 40 or something like that. It's a lot that you generally run into when you're playing them, either as a dungeon master or as a player. They have very simple weapons. I know that in the current version in 5e, they're considered to be very good at making traps. This is not something that was with the kobolds to start with. It's cool, don't have a problem with it, but we're talking about the original ones. The looks have changed quite a bit. The heritage has changed quite a bit. Now they're considered to be draconic in heritage. That definitely wasn't the case when it started. Think about them more like underground dwelling lizard people, but small ones, and pretty dumb ones. In combat, well, they're small, right? They don't like a lot of other creatures. They hate most everything. They have a special hate, a very special hate, for the gnomes. On days when gnomes annoy me, I guess I kind of understand. But no, it's not like that. It's kind of like how we feel about orcs and well, in my case, elves. It's like a racial hatred, and they want to instantly attack each other anytime they see one another. Now, gnomes, for all their faults and so forth, they still are way better, smarter, faster, everything you can think of. They're better than the kobolds, and they can also take care of them in job lots. Now, once again, they're a very basic creature. They're kind of like maybe a run-up test or something like that, or a beta for orcs. If you're in a dungeon fighting, they're just not much. And of course, as a dwarf, we've spoken about kobolds several times here on the show. dwarves find kobolds amusing. They're not any kind of competition. When somebody asks me about a kobold from a dungeon master standpoint, and as a dwarf, I'm like a half, somewhere between 0 and 1. I mean, they're so easy. That's why we play Kick the Kobold, and that's why we have kobold kibble. That's for feeding the dwarf dog. I mean, kobolds they're really not much of anything at all. And when you ask players about it, this is one of the few intelligent creatures, and I use the term loosely, that ranks below an orc. Now, how many things do you know out there that rank lower than an orc in terms of, I mean, they said they were easier to deal with than a skeleton or a zombie. I mean, really? Wow. Doesn't say much for the kobold. Now, once again, in today's world, which I'm not going to spend much time on because some of this to me is just weird, kobolds are all the thing. There's even a character class, I believe, in 5e. Yes. Yeah. For kobolds. And you get them in all kinds of fantasy literature and so forth where they've changed considerably. Now, I love that show, Delicious in Dungeon. But if you've seen the most recent episode, they've started the second season. And one of the things that they have in there, it's more of a repeat character from another adventuring group, is a kobold. Now, how kobolds got to look like 7-foot tall Shiba Inus, when did that happen? That's really weird. So they come across as something completely different than what I expect for a kobold, but yet they're called a kobold. Now, there's plenty of deviations in that show from traditional Dungeons and Dragons views of characters, but it just goes to show you how much it's shifted over time. Now, kobolds as a threat, whether you're a dungeon master or a player, seems to rank at 1 or less, which makes it the lowest level threat that we've reviewed yet on the show. So I guess that's a distinction. I wouldn't worry about them. You can pretty much spit at them and they'll run away. If you kick them hard, like we do, the dwarves, they're kind of fun. They make a big squeak noise when you hit them right. But as a opponent, not difficult. Not at all. Sometimes useful for carrying forward small portions of the plot, but they're not very smart, so they can't be trusted to do much of anything useful. So from a DM standpoint, I really can't use them very much for that either. From a player standpoint, they're just something to keep your muscle memory sharp as a fighter or whatever it is that you do to defend yourself. So, that's what we see with the kobold. Not much of a opponent. Changed a bit over time, but still, I think they remain a very easy problem to deal with from an adventuring standpoint. That's the kobold. Hope you enjoyed that today. If you did, please give us a like, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. What the hell? And come back and see us again real soon. Remember that dwarves rock.